What is like the one thing that people ask you all the time when it comes to employee reviews?
I guess the why. Why do we have it? Why are we doing it? What is it for?
Do you really feel like they don't understand why, or do you feel like it's more of an excuse not to do it?
I think it depends on the industry that you're working with, because some people jump out and they go right into school. So whenever they're jumping out and they're going right into schooling, they may have never had college, is what I mean by that. They may have never had a job where they've even been delivered a review or have any concept of what that is. So whenever they're told, oh, now you're a business owner, go ahead and deliver a review to your associates and let them know about their performance, they don't have any way to gauge that at all, the good, the bad, or the indifferent. Twice annually. So that would be done. There would be one review that would be a non-monetary, and then the second review would be a monetary review, meaning that's whenever they were given money or given more
increase in wage or whatever.
Yeah, or vacation time, sick time. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you have a job before you had this corporate job?
Yes.
Did you have any employee review before you got this corporate job?
I didn't, but I was primarily fast food, and I was also management in the fast food jobs, and in that industry, I think that there's just so much turnover that you're not seeing those reviews happen. Right.
So take yourself back, if you can, to that very first day that you are in this corporate gig and you are scheduled for your employee review. Were you nervous about it?
I was nervous about it because my first review wasn't actually as a manager delivering the review. Right. So both sides of it, I felt really nervous, but receiving the review I did because I didn't have someone that gave me great guidance through the process, right? So there wasn't someone that actually said, here's what to expect on your review. Right. Here are the areas that we're going to look at.
When you sat down for the review and you went through the process, what were you thinking about as the review was going? Were you having an internal dialogue at the same time you're having an external dialogue?
Yes.
What was the internal dialogue like?
Well, so the manager, I have a different way that I choose to present reviews, but the manager at the time had actually given me the review. So I had everything in front of me. I had all of the answers to how he felt about me in front of me. So I was actually reading ahead. So the dialogue, I wasn't exactly paying attention to what he was saying because I just wanted to get the overall rating. Overall, what do you think about me? So
you wanted to bottom line it quick.
I did, yes. And it was less because I didn't really even know what the questions were going to be, or what the performance should be. So I kind of skipped to the end and found out I was awesome.
No.
What was the lead up? Like, I think a lot of anxiety for both employer and employee come from like, hey, it's coming. Like, we're going to do this next week. We're going to have this. And like, obviously the employee has this anxiety that like, oh my gosh, what are they going to say? Are they going to be happy? And I think the employer is like, what am I going to say? How can I like explain to them the things that they're doing well, but how can I also like bring up those things that are going poorly? So for you, what was the lead up? Like, did you know, hey, the expectation was laid on day one that you're going to get it on day 90, or did they let you know, hey, next week we're going to do that? What was that?
So I did not receive it at the 90 or 120 day mark, which I don't agree with. I think that before you decide if an associate is going to stay as a permanent fixture or not stay, you should have that conversation with them. Mm-hmm. So even if at that point you're just dismissing them from the company, I think that that's a very appropriate time to have that conversation. But whenever we're talking about leading up to the 6-month review, again, my first one was just a shock. So whenever I started working through that with associates, or especially someone at a management level, go ahead and give them that review. Mm-hmm. Share that with them so that then they can understand what the expectations are. I prefer to do that during the onboarding process, just so that the associate has an idea. And what I'll tell them is, my expectation is not that we're going to check every one of these boxes. You may not learn some of these skills until you've been here for 6 or 9 months, maybe even up to the year mark before we check some of these boxes. But I want you to be aware of these are the things that you're going to be learning and developing on over the course of the next year.
When you said give them the review, you're talking about the format and the blank copy, not the filled in copy that's got the evaluation. Like, you got the evaluation as you went. That's not what you're recommending.
No, that's not what I'm recommending. What I'm recommending is give that to the person because they can also take the time to read that and understand that. And for me, whenever I'm onboarding someone and we're going up to that 90 or 120 day probationary period, and I want to know that they've had the time to understand what the job entails. Mm-hmm. So you may find people, whenever I worked in in retail, right? I would find people that would be like, this is too much. This is too much. Like, this job is not worth it. I am not paid enough or whatever. So they would just transition themselves from the company, which I know can seem defeating, but in reality, I didn't put a bunch of training into someone that was just going to fall off, at
Right.
that 6-month mark whenever I delivered a review.
It's such an ironic thing, because most employers or most entrepreneurs, small business people especially, hate to go through the hire process. They hate to go through the fire process, the termination. They hate the whole thing that comes with trying to find a good one and then train them up, and, are they going to stick? Are they not? Whatever. And yet they don't do something as simple as this and as routine as this, which could really not only make the most of your great ones, but really give your ones that need something to live up to, and an expectation. So the first place I was exposed to this was from you. Yes. And I remember when you introduced it, I was like floored, because I had never seen a review like that.
Do you remember what you asked me?
I'm sure it was something very, very brilliant, because knowing me.
Well, so your question for me was, is there any way to make it shorter?
Yeah, that's true.
And my response was, no, absolutely not, because we're not equipping the associate with the tools. We're setting a bunch of expectations for an associate, but then we're saying, hey, we only want to tell you about a quarter of them at your review, but our expectation is that you still do the other 75%. So
is that what you meant by shorter? Or were you thinking I'm just curious, like, shorter for you meant what?
Yeah, so when I asked that question, it's hard enough to get the folks that I'm mentoring to be compliant on just the basics of employee management, like have a staff meeting, go over your metrics, do your weekly stuff, do your huddle. And so when she rolls out a review tool, the first thing that I'm thinking of, there's no way I can get somebody to be compliant with that when they're not even doing the basics. And it's not a fault of the tool, it's really a fault of the person not doing the bare minimum, and then not even doing something that would solve a lot of problems, prevent a lot of problems from occurring.
Yes.
So for me, it was more about the compliance of it.
I gotcha. Like, can we simplify it?
Right, exactly.
So that they are not so afraid.
Exactly.
Like it's a process.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I think to some degree that's proven true, because we have it available in my company, and there's very little compliance with it.
Right. And it's pretty simple. I mean, I've used it.
Right.
It's very straightforward.
Right.
So, okay. I'm curious to know, like, obviously we all can fairly well recognize a high performer versus a really poor, low performer. In my mind, I think, when there's little to improve, because someone's a high performer, we'll start with a high performer, like, what do you focus on when you're like, I don't have a lot to tell them, because they really do meet the metrics, they go above and beyond in a lot of ways. I mean, you might have a couple small things, but, like, how do we give more substance to that review when you have somebody like that?
Yes, how did they do that for you, Missy? Because you're so awesome.
That was so excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I learned over the years myself delivering a review is there can be people that are exceeding expectations. So in the way that our review tool is structured, exceeding expectations is really the highest level that you can go to. However, whenever you truly sit down and you think about what would my expectation be of this associate, what would the perfect or best associate look like, that's a really high bar to achieve. So what I find is that sometimes people they haven't sat down and thought about what it would mean for someone to excel in that area. Now, we can have something simple like dress code that the associate's excelling in because they're coming in every day and they're clean and they don't have any body odor and, their hair isn't a mess. So you can have an associate that excels in that area. Right. Of course you can. But other areas, whenever we're talking about, are you coming in with a positive and enthusiastic approach to your workday? Can we really say that anyone's doing that every day? Probably not. Okay. Now, do I think that, you should only be looking at the last 6 months? Absolutely. So, Maria, for instance, you may be exceeding expectations in an area for 6 months, but then you shift your focus, as we all do, to another area where maybe you're not exceeding. So you may find that exceeds category actually drops down. This isn't to make the associate never win, right? But this is just to say, let's challenge that. Let's think about what that actually means. And if you have an associate that's doing great, That is awesome. I had a manager that I worked with that told me, because I didn't want to take a further promotion in what I was doing, that I would never be an associate that was ranked the highest. And I said, well, that's a little absurd to me. And he said, well, no, because I reserve that for people that want to be the next level of management. So I sat there for a second, and then I asked him, I said, that's fine, but what is the motivating factor then for me? Because financially, whenever I'm in that exceeds category, you're going to give me a higher percentage of a raise, which may be a 1.5% to a 2.5% higher of a raise. So what is my incentive then? You've taken that away. So it's very important too that we realize whenever we're giving people those higher ratings, those are the irreplaceable associates, or very hard to replace associates.
Gotcha. Well, and then for the opposite of that, those low performers, when you really find it hard to, maybe you can say, hey, you do a good job of showing up on time, but that might be it. Like, is that kind of how that goes, or how do you? Is that where you go? Yeah, this person's probably not a good fit for us, and we might be transitioning them if they're that poor of a performer.
Yeah, so one of the things that I tell people is that it doesn't really matter. Your associate should never be shocked when they walk into a review, or you haven't been guiding them the entire time. So where have you been for the last 6 months? If you're walking into this review and you're having to say all of these negative things to an associate, how many write-ups has that associate had to have development in those other areas? Where have the action steps been for you as a manager? So whenever I call people back and we have complicated conversations, they're not surprised by those, because we've had a verbal, we've had a written, and now we're sitting down in a review saying, you're not excelling in this area. So that's really, really important to me, that the associate is there. Now, even whenever we're looking at an associate that maybe we're still trying to develop, I prefer to use more of the sandwich technique, right? Yeah. Something good, something bad, something good. If I bring you in, Doc, and I just bash you the whole time for an hour, are you going to leave motivated and ready to help me with my company?
Well, as a married man, yes, I'm used to that. No, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
But you're going to leave and you're going to say, "Wow, that was really crappy. Like that, I did not feel good. I don't really want to work here anymore. Mm-hmm. They think that I'm crap." So how do I help motivate that associate to do better? Well, that's also by helping them set their goals at the end, right? And setting actions that we can take to help them. And also for the manager to take a moment back and to apologize to that associate. Mm-hmm. Because if you are sitting down and you have to give a review that's that terrible, turn around and review yourself. Right. Because you did not support that person throughout this process, right. Or you should have transitioned them from your company.
Right.
Because that might mean that you should have just pulled the trigger on a review sooner than you expected. Essentially, right?
Yeah, and either that or just having, you can either do a review or just do the write-ups, right? Because 1, 2, 3 transition, right? So you're going to have the conversation, you're going to give a verbal, you're going to do a write-up, and then you're going to do another write-up, and then you're going to say, this is the moment where we transition from the company, right? This isn't a good fit for you or I. Thank you so much for your time, and then dismiss them from the company. It's not really that simple, but there's action steps that you can take again so that associate is not shocked as they come in and sit down and receive a review. Right. That's something that I never wanted. Now, here's the thing. You have people that are just not confident in themselves and they're doing fantastic, and you come in and you tell them that and they're like, I didn't think I was that great. Like, thank you so much. So I see some of that, but I would always feel that I had major areas for improvement on both of them if someone came in and acted completely shocked about either side of it, whether they're doing amazing or whether they're just really not meeting those expectations.
I'll just say for how I think and how I interact with people, I sniff out that sandwich technique so quickly. Mm-hmm. I mean, and if you do that with me, I don't hear the good because I know there's the negative is coming, or this is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. I don't do that sandwich technique. I try to be just very straight about the assessment, where we are, what's going on. If you suck, you suck. Mm-hmm. But I never want to just linger in the negativity. I want to be truthful about where you are, where I see you, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But then also talk about what I see in you, what I see in your potential, right? Where you are excelling, right?
Yes.
And it's not we have to do the bad and then the good. Sometimes we talk a lot about the good, and then we say, "Hey, look, there's this other area." Mm-hmm. So I know that what's that called? The compliment sandwich. There's
Yes,
even a
yes.
psychological term about that. But that turns me off because I know what's coming.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
I've had people do that to me and probably where they screwed up was they were not being authentic in the praise or the positive.
Right.
They were using that as a springboard to say, now let me soften the blow on how much you suck.
Absolutely.
And I bet when you do it, you've got something that's very authentic, very
Yes.
true, like you're sincere about where they're excelling. And
Because if I didn't, then they would have already been transitioned from the company.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking for whenever I say that, also, it's to challenge the manager
Right.
or an inexperienced person delivering a review, right? So someone like you, that makes sense that whenever you're going through that process with someone that you wouldn't necessarily need those techniques. But what I see managers that, the associate's been great for 4 months and then the last 2 months they're slipping.
Right.
And instead of looking at why is this associate declining, what's going on in the company, what's going on in their personal life that could be causing this, they're not even paying attention to the first 4 months. So that's why I also tell people, hey, keep those notes, because even when you're doing that sandwich technique, there was a point in time when that person showed up early to work every single day.
Right.
What demotivated
Yep.
them? What made them not do that? So that's where I find the importance of just saying, hey, especially whenever you're new and inexperienced, you're going to need something like that, or you're just going to deliver a review. I actually review people's reviews. That's a weird way to say that, but I actually check over reviews that people write. And what I'll find is in the comments section, they will just be bashing the person the entire time. And I'm embarrassed for them to deliver this review because I'm saying, you truly have nothing good about this person, then why are they in your company?
Right.
What is it that makes them in that company? And another reason why I like that sandwich technique is for the same reason that we talk about laughing or lightening the mood before we start our day. And then at the end of it, to tell them, like, I still do value you. I
Yeah.
still do want you to try
Right.
to work with this company. And if I didn't, then we would be having a transition conversation with that review, right? I wouldn't even deliver the review. I would just sit them down at that 6-month mark and say, hey, we're transitioning from the company today. Thanks for your time. So for me, it's very important to build them up at the end and let them know, I still want you to work here. I still want to help you. I acknowledge that I have weaknesses that maybe contributed to what's going on with you.
Yeah. And add to that, because I think that's super duper duper important. I feel like what comes to mind is how many times, we work with someone who their pride gets in the way, and that they utilize that review tool to be right versus helping right? Like their goal, right? So they're trying to assert their authority in this review tool versus trying to seek out improvement for this, employer associate. That I did a review recently with one of my employees, and that honestly, by the end of it, she was smiling, and there were things that we had to talk about that needed improvement, but it was that same idea of like, and the first thing I told her when she sat down was, we're so happy with you. Like, I just want to go ahead and let you know, like, we're so happy with you. You've been doing a fantastic job. We are going to talk about some areas that I think you could work on, and I'm going to support you in that. That put my pride to the side, because it showed her that I'm here for you. I'm really her support more than she's my support. Like, as a good leader, we should look at it that way. But yeah, when they start trying to just assert authority and dominance and just make it all about I'm right, you're wrong, I feel like who wouldn't shut down on that?
Right.
I have a huge problem with that myself. You get the ego, the pride, the narcissism, the need to be right. You get all those emotional, like, ego-driven things as part of this. I not only shut down in the presence of that, but I want to, like, take the person doing that and, like, take them outside and take them to the woodshed, right? You need to be punched in the mouth a few times so you learn some respect about your fellow man. I completely agree.
I mean, if they were honest, they would be like, don't talk to me that way.
That's right.
So let's treat other people but with dignity and...
That's almost like the golden rule, I've heard, right? Yeah. She said something a moment ago that I want to circle back to, right? Okay. You said, and I'm paraphrasing, you had a manager or a supervisor who, and these are my words, would really arbitrarily withhold a level of the eval, not based on the employee's performance, but based on their ambition in the company.
Yes.
I hate that as well.
Yes.
Because that employee review is about the performance of the duties. It's not about you being a good soldier wanting to, like, advance in the company, right? There are some people that they do a good job, a great job, And that's really all that they want to do.
Yes.
They don't want to have the stress and the responsibility that comes with something bigger. Not everybody's like that. Like,
Right.
I always want to advance, always want to try to, push myself to do more. But that's not how everybody's wired. So one of the worst things you can do is really take that employee who's really great at what they do. They do a marvelous job. You don't have to watch over them, micromanage and all that, and then put a negative on them because they're not like advancing like you think they should or want to be part of the company's management structure or whatever.
Yeah, and unfortunately with some of the big box companies, you just see that more because they're thinking about their own selfish needs
Right.
first, So I remember even specifically with this manager, I had told him, one of the things that we really looked at was training your replacement, right?
Yeah.
Who will replace you? I already had my replacement trained, and I had her interviewing for other management positions within side of the company. So I told him, I said, well, I've already trained my replacement, and because my replacement is doing these interviews, here's my next up person.
Yeah.
So whereas I'm okay with staying where I am because I was a young mom, right? I had just started a family. The last thing that I wanted, like you said, was more of the stress and more time away from
Right.
my family. So that boundary wasn't respected. So what did it do for me? Well, I still continued to be motivated because of my team, because of the love that I had for my team and the people that worked for me. Most people, it doesn't work that way for, right? Some of my peers, so out of a group of, let's say, 14 of my peers, there is there's a magic number, which is somewhere around 3 of those people that can be considered exceeding expectations.
Right.
So wrap your head around that for a second, that if someone that achieves less than I do, less goals, less that their stats are great, right? Their retention is poor, they are more likely to receive and exceeds expectations simply because they want to step up in a company. So that's sad, and that's where I want, right? Doesn't that just burn?
It's so funny because just because they want it doesn't mean they're the right fit. So that exactly it perpetuates that. It's like the ridiculousness of it all.
Right.
It is. Yeah.
Yes.
Have a real problem with that. One of our pillars is like, as an owner, as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, you got to get yourself right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there are just so many ways that we screw things up. Even good tools, good advice, when not implemented the right way, when there's an agenda behind it,
Yeah.
you just ruin good people. I have worked with more small business owners that ruin good people than they're willing to talk about.
Right. Well, and if they're not willing to talk about it, then they're not growing.
That's exactly right.
Because we've all, the 3 of us sitting here, we can say we've had our downs where we've ruined good people. I can admit that I've made
Oh, I've ruined
mistakes.
good people.
Yeah, where I've made mistakes and in good intentions maybe.
Right.
Was trying, but looking back, I'm like, wow, that was terrible.
Yes.
I could have been kinder
Right.
or more compassionate to them about their situation, or I could have stepped back and given them more space to
Right.
learn and grow, whatever that is. But because I can recognize it, I think that's given me more room to grow as a leader. And I think we all, the 3 of us, really can appreciate that.
I think if you're going to be objective with yourself, and you're seeing the same cyclical pattern, like I'm finding good people, and then in 6 months they're out the door, right? And I
Yeah.
find another in
Yes.
6 months. You're the common denominator in that relationship. Like the person that's in the mirror
You don't
is
say.
the problem. Like, not everybody that you find is marching to the
Right.
same drum. It's you that's the
Right.
problem, the issue.
That's been one of my largest challenges with working with my clients, is explaining to them, like, they have the attitude that people like wake up in the morning and are like, I think I'm going to go do a crap job today. And what I tell people is that most people want to do a good job.
Yeah.
But most people want to be told exactly what to do every step of the way. And while I'm not a fan of micromanaging at all, there are people that they just want to be told every single thing to do,
Sure.
which is why at some point we're going to record on having an SOP or, operations procedures. Like how are you going to run that company in a way that the associates know what's expected of them? Because that's when you see a lot of those retention issues also.
One more thing I want to talk about on this, especially. I just came across an article in Business Insider about Gen Zs and millennials. And basically the premise of that article is they would rather be unemployed than unhappy in their job.
Right.
And people my age, because I'm the elder statesman here. People my age, we fuss about the young people coming up and how they don't have the same work ethic. And
Right.
guess what? My grandparents fussed about my generation, and their grandparents fussed about them. I mean, there's even people, who've seen like it written on Egyptian papyrus, the Egyptians complaining about their children and grandchildren. Like
Yes.
this is just part of our culture stuff, right?
That's cool.
But what's crazy about this review tool, especially when it comes to Gen Z and millennials, if there's ever been a generation of people raised on praise and like evaluation and your esteem is important and not just the performance or the grades, but like caring for them as a whole person, it's this group.
Yes.
And now you've got something available like a review tool that would absolutely hit the mark with, like, this is the group, this is the population that's going to flock to this kind of review and this kind of
They're going to require it.
Yeah,
Right?
they
This is going to be something that even as people that are not business owners are listening to this podcast, there are going to be people that are going to want this for them, for themselves, like to go to work. They're going to say, I want this for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We all want to know that we, if nothing more than just our intentions to be, recognized, like our efforts.
Right.
Again, you're showing up. That's these days even better than half of them. I can't tell you how many people I talk to. They're like, I hire them, and they don't even show up to day one, or they might be there by day 5. So recognizing their efforts, but that I think it's the worth. Missy and I were talking about that, like the younger generation. I think I don't know why this is, but our parents kind of had that inherent like knowledge that they had worth, and they didn't need to be told that. And I don't know where that shifted for our generation, but that hits me. I seek validation that what I'm doing is worthy, and I think that's just getting more and more prominent, as we see younger generations. So yeah.
And I think some of it, Maria, is that, whenever you were talking just a second ago about, where is that self-worth for people in our age range? Well, talk to your friends. How many of your friends were told, go outside, get out of the house, don't talk, you don't speak unless spoken to. The adults are talking, the adults are hanging out, or whatever. So that was a time whenever they weren't given a voice. And a lot of people just aren't given a voice. Like, even if you talk to even people in your generation, Doc, like, there are people that are just not given that. So during a review, that is not the complete time for the person delivering the review to just sit there and just tell that person. That's the time to give them a moment to ask you for help and ask you for support. I always show up with my notebook and a pen, and I am ready to write down what it is that they need from me. If I can't handle it right then and there, I'm going to do what I can to help them and to support them. And I think that that's where they may not feel like every single day their voice is being heard, but at least if they knew whenever you sat down, that you do more than write it down, by the way. So anyone that just thinks you just show up with a pen and piece of paper and you write it down and you're like, nailed it, you didn't. So if you're just going to show up and do that, then that's not going to work. But right, don't be fake, but give them that support. And whenever they know, hey, at least once every 6 months, I'm going to be sat down and like given that opportunity to really speak my mind and to really say what I need. And what's really great about that too, from a company standpoint, during that time, those associates tell you some really cool ideas that they have that can really help your. I'm sure that you know about that, Doc, right? With some of your clients that are utilizing the tool, they're going to help you to grow that business also.
Right. Well, we could talk all day about this. I feel like that makes me start thinking about, having open door policies and all these other things. But
Yes.
I have picked up a few tips today listening to you, so thank you.
Oh,
I guess that means we're out of time.
We're all done. Yeah, Maria said, we're done.
Wrap this baby up. No, I think it's good. I think, obviously we could talk about how a review is prepared and delivered as far as just the mechanics of it all. But I think us talking through the mindset and maybe some of those hurdles going into that process for me is the thing that we don't hear enough about.
Yes.
So anything else we didn't cover?
Oh, there's a lot we didn't cover, but what did we cover today? I think that we gave a really good idea as to why you should deliver a review tool. But like you said, there's so much more to unpack with that. What time of day should you deliver the review? What should your attitude be like? How much conversation should you have with an associate? What verbiage should you use and what verbiage should you not use? So I think that those are just ideas for future podcasts.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
Cool. No, I don't have anything to add.
He's like, I was told they're stopping. We're
Yeah,
stopping.
I'm shutting up.
That's all right. Okay, cool.